Hello and welcome. I'm George Coll to part one of a three-part series titled Willow Bend Creek. I'd like to welcome YouTube people for part one and Uscreens for part 1, 2, and 3. So YouTubers, if you want to look at part 2 and 3, migrate over to Uscreen. The address is down below. It's a paid platform, $9.99 a month. Not a big deal. Okay. With that, I have about 112 of my very best tutorials on that. So today's block in, and that means we fill up the whole canvas with shapes and value colors. I go through that mixture by mixture, stroke by stroke, and you can see everything, what I do in 30 minutes, step by step. So join me. I think you're going to really like it, and let's get started with today's painting. Okay, bye-bye. Welcome, I'm George Coll to part one of Willow Creek Bend. Working with oils today, as I normally am. And I have a basic palette of blue, red, yellow. And with these three basic colors, I have some mixers, which is Naples, yellow, and cool gray. Over here I have my siennas. I have raw and burnt sienna, viridian, and I have my titanium whites down here on the lower right. If you see something on the left, it's probably slop paint that was left over from last week's painting. And I can show you what that's from. I'm kind of working on a large piece. Kind of, it's a takeoff from the smaller pieces that we did in class last week. So that's what that stuff's from. Olives and stuff like that. All right, so I'm working today with a 8 flat, and then I have some filberts, which would be a 4, and then a worn out filbert 4, and it looks like I have a little number 2 filbert. Okay, so how do we get started on these paintings? I think the important thing is, if you're inspired to do a painting, I mean, people have asked me, how do you know a good composition when you see one? There's a lot of theory and books out. Edgar Payne probably is the most referred to for composition. But basically, I think what I find after taking thousands of photographs, that some come to me as having something to lead into and tells a story of what's going on back there with value colors and shapes working together to tell a story. So that's how I determine it. But I take a lot of photographs, and most of them don't come out to be very good. There might be something I can take from it, but the important thing is get outside and paint and start seeing for yourself, working outside, the benefits of plein air painting. Today what I'm thinking of doing is, I really like this composition because there's a contrast between red and green, and there's a willow shape going back in there. But I've got this big triangle back here, the sky, and I might put a mountain back there. So, if you're missing something, you can always put something in. What else can I tell you about this composition as I take a sip of coffee? I guess the important thing is there's something in here that doesn't really help me, and that there's a big tree to the left, and I think that kind of interrupts my flow going back. So I might get rid of that big tree on the left, and we'll discuss that when we get there. So we'll start with some line drawing, and then with the line drawings we'll fill in with value color and try to cover this canvas with value colors in 30 minutes. So I've been yakking away, so we're going to probably have to do that in 25 minutes. So you don't have to go at my speed. You can start and stop any time, and that's perfectly all right. All right, so let's get started with number 2. So I'm going to use that because I'll use a drawing color. Oh yes, I'm working on a tone canvas, and that's kind of new today. So I toned it with an acrylic, and because I wanted to make sure it was good and dry by the time class started. But you say, why are we starting with this? We always experiment with different things and try out tones and so forth. And you don't have to fight so much with all those little white things peeking through your canvas. But the story behind this is I ran out of canvas last night when I was setting up for today. So I covered up these oil sketches that I didn't like very much, and that's how we're going to start today. So, okay, so let's go with a blue and white. So with a tone canvas, you want something that's going to show up. And I'm going to throw some raw sienna in there. And let's see if it shows up. I think it does, yep. So it's got to be a little bit lighter value. I'm going to just add a touch of just very little terp to get a little bit of a grease going here. So what can be some foundation lines? I think the top of these trees was one. Somewhere in here, and then this willow thing coming down here, Willow Bend comes off, and then comes in here somewhere. And I might change the design in that also a little bit. So these are my willows. Now these lines might make more sense to me than it does to you. I'm going to add a little red in there. See if that can, so that made a little bit of a light purple. Ooh, that's pretty. Got to lighten that up though. And this will be willow down in here. And then there's also another, I'm going to have another willow, non-willow area right in here. You can see it at the bottom of the reference. There's some snow down there. I'm going to enlarge that a little bit. Now this is not a time to be using your best brushes because I'm using the side of them and scraping quite a bit. Now I'm going to darken up and go from I'm going to go from blue, I'm going to use ultra blue and burnt sienna. Throw in a little bit of alizarin. Crimson Lake is good too. And there is a tree bank up in here. And there's some trees here. This big one right here, I'm going to eliminate right in here, as I've been saying I would. And this is going to be trees. And then in the background, I'm going to bring in an alpine mountain. Right in here. So this will be Alpine Mountain up in there. And of course you don't see that in the reference because we're making that up. And you have the license to make things up in your paintings. Don't have to be a slave to what's out there. Make the composition work for you. Well, now with this rough idea going on here, I have to start getting a little bit more specific with my shapes and refine them. So let's make some darks, which was blue, a little bit of red, and some raw sienna. And there's some, I'm going to start making some trees. coming down. I'm going to bring them farther down. And I'm going to put some darks on the bottom of the Willow Bend here. And then I'm going to put some trees up in here. These are foreground trees, which will be darker, and then this mass of trees in the back will be lighter. And we'll play with that in just a minute. And I think there's one that comes down pretty low. So we'll put him in an appropriate place, which would be right here. All right, so let's lighten this now by mixing some of this foreground drawing color we have into the darker stuff. I don't have enough. I need to change brushes for this. I'm going to wear this poor number 2 out. Got to remember, my number 2 is for drawing. So I'm going to go to this old worn out filbert because I'm going to be scrubbing a lot with it. So I'm going to go blue, red, raw sienna, and some white in there. A little bit more blue, and some yellow, lemon yellow. It's just not coming out to be a very nice color. So I added some Naples and some more yellow. Let's see what it looks like. Just a little bit more gray. I'm sorry, a little bit more ultra blue. And you can see now there's a difference between the foreground trees value and the background trees. It doesn't have to be a big value change, it's a subtle one. Now, I think I'm being a little stingy with my trees, so I'm going to bring in a hill coming in to kind of balance it out here a little bit. And I'm going to bring this one up a little bit more in places. All right, so as I said, I refined my values and shapes a little bit more, and I'm going to be continuing to do that, and we will do that in the foreground now. With that, I think we can pick up this value color I made for the trees, move it over in a place that I might be able to use it later, and clean my palette with my trusty razor blade scraper that I got from Amazon, or you can get it from your auto parts store. Because the paint stores always have these thin, short ones. I like the long ones. Then you don't get your knuckles on the paint below. All right, so let's make a value color for the foreground. So it has probably something to do with raw sienna and alizarin. Raw sienna, alizarin. Let's throw in some Naples. And let's darken it on one side with some red and blue. I may not have enough light, so let me start with my red raw sienna. So again, that's alizarin, raw sienna, Naples. Okay, here we go. That's a nice color coming in here. That's a nice contrast. I think that's what attracts me to this particular image. And there's a pine tree down here that might be very beneficial. Let me see if I can go back to some dark here that I can get. I'm going to use some burnt sienna blue. Let's see if I can get him in. I think I could probably use a couple of these guys. Let me see. Maybe one over here too. I'll try it. All right, now that I've darkened up my brush, I have to really clean it out again to get back to my warm colors. Now this stage is probably the most important stage of the painting. And what I find with my students is they're rushing through this like this is not the important part. The important part is detail. And it's not, it's foundation. The important part of all paintings is foundation, just like building a house. You don't worry about the draperies and linens yet. I think we're almost done with this part of the painting. I think we need to get some darks in a few places. I put them in the front of the masses, right? Like here's a mass, I put it in front. Like here's my darks up in here, in front of the mass. And adds as a nice starting point to say, okay, this is a change in value. I'm going to move this off to the side and move on to getting these lights in. All right, let me take a sip of my coffee, stand back and look at my shapes. Jenny's been buying this stuff called Seattle's Best. It's really good coffee. All right, so let's make a mixture for snow and mountain and stuff like that. So let's start first with this fella up here. So we'll go with just a little bit of ultra, not too much. I probably made too much there. And let's throw just a touch of gray into it. Just a touch. And let's go back to the good old number 4 scrubber. My worn down filbert. Filberts get more pointy all the time. Even my flats get looking like filberts. At this stage of the painting, I'm using all these strong strokes, and I know that we're going to let's darken it up just a little bit more blue. There we go. Wow, working on these toned canvases really can take on a life of their own. They really show up when you put a value color in there. And I think what I just want to try to do is thoroughly cover my canvas so I don't have a lot of base value coming through. I'm going to go a little lighter up on top. Maybe emulate some snow or something like that. And I think that's good enough for now. And with that, let's throw a lot of white into the bottom of this mixture to work on the foreground down in here. I know photographs just say white, but we're going to add just a little bit of cool to it, which would be this ultra blue that we have in gray, just a little bit. So it's not exactly white. So I'm getting into areas where it's easy to contaminate my brush. So I'm reloading a lot, as you can see. Oh darn it, that's contamination. I could just see it right there. And what I do, if these little paintings, this is 11 by 14 work out, then I make bigger paintings, as I just showed you at the beginning of the session. I always like, I live in Colorado, so I need some of these beautiful Vista paintings. Oop, running short of product. Let's get some paint in here, for gosh sakes. I know this probably looks like white from your vantage point, but it's actually, I've got this blue-gray mixture in it. Here's what white looks like. You can see it's just bong. It's a little too strong. Breaking up those last few strokes was just breaking up this strong shape. Let me get back and see how we're doing. Oh, looking good. And again, I didn't make enough product. What a surprise to the people that have been following me. Come on, let's get some product off here. All right, we have left the sky, and we will get to that next, but let me take a closer look at some of these shapes I have here and see what I can do. I'm going to go to my number 2 filbert, and I'm mixing in some new color here. And trying to break up these shapes up in here. And to try to avoid contamination, I'm using an extreme angle on my brush. There's no way to avoid it, but at least it comes off a little bit purer by the angle of the brush and how much you have laid on, paint you've laid onto your brush. You can see I've changed this design here a little bit to, I think make it more interesting for me. And I'm just plopping in some snow in various places to just a little bit of blue, not too much. And refining my shapes. That's basically what I'm doing right now, because I think I'm running on schedule pretty well. All right. Let's get up into the sky. Well, if I'm using this stuff here, how can we make a variation of this to make a sky color so it isn't too close to the mountain color, but says what it needs to say. So I'm thinking of some sort of gray and just a touch of Viridian. Boy, if you go more than, I mean a touch, a little minute place of Viridian, it's not going to work for you. Now I think I've got the right mixture, which is white, a little bit of gray, and a touch, I say a touch, of Viridian, which is verde, which is green. And let's see what that comes out to look like. So I'm going to go back to my old scrubber number 4 filbert. And let's take a look. Darn, that's bright. We got to knock it down with more gray. More gray. Jeez. More gray. More Viridian. More Viridian. And let me mix it up and make a thorough mixture with my knife. Now that's looking good. So we're going to just use one value for the sky, and then we'll work on top of it with some lighter and darker values as we move on in the painting, but not today. This is just block in. And at this point, what I'm thinking, I'm hoping I have enough sky color to cover up this sky. I think I do. You can hear my poor brush working away so hard. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more white to the mixture as I get closer to the mountain. This is such an interesting color, this gray, this cool gray mixture and a touch of Viridian. It's so pretty. Sorry for the fan that came on in the other room. It's probably being picked up by the mic. It'll be off in a second. I'm painting in my studio, which is a reconditioned barn on my property. Oh, that's looking pretty. You know, I've got a few minutes left, and I've got this mixture. I'm going to bring some of this in the top of my trees. See how I flip my brush over, and now I'm reloading. And I'm going to lighten the top of these trees. And I'm going to go back now and do some downstrokes just to soften the tops. And now I'm going to use my prior color that I already mixed in. Go up and kind of soften that hard edge I have between the lights and darks. See how I'm just running it in between to, and if you add a little more ultra to my mixture, you can Kind of get a sense that there's foreground trees and there's trees as they go back. And with those darks, let's also work on darkening the base of these willows. You can see how I'm just running some darks through here. And I'm going to darken these trees a little bit with that same darkening agent. And I'll put a few stubby trees in there also, just little guys, just so they're not all alone. I've got a little detail work to do, and I'm running out of time. So off camera, this is what I'm going to do. I'm using this sky mixture. I'm going to lighten it a little bit. And I'm going to go up here where I need some ultra blue in there. It's too light. And I'm going to get into working out these shapes on the hill. See right in here, I'm going to work that detail in because I'm out of time. Thank you so much for block-in of Willow Bend Creek. And so we started with a tone canvas, and this is where we are after 30 minutes. And thank you so much for coming by. This will be a 3-part series, and I'll see you next in part 2. All right, thanks for coming by. Bye-bye.